Hey everyone, we're going to break down what was a really busy week at the White House. They put out a ton of official announcements, proclamations, you name it. So let's just dive right in and see what's going on.
You know, when you see this many documents dropping all at once, you have to ask yourself, what's the big picture here? If we piece it all together, what does it tell us about what the administration is really focused on right now? That's the question we're going to try to answer.
All right, so the first big theme that you just can't miss is all about your wallet. It seems like a lot of these moves are aimed at tackling the cost of living for everyday Americans.
First up, let's talk about rent. The White House was really quick to point out new data showing that the national median rent has actually dropped for the 6th month in a row. We're talking prices at their lowest point in 4 years. And this isn't just one or two places, it's happening in markets all over the country.
And to back this up, the administration highlighted this quote from a real estate expert. They said, 2026 is shaping up to be one of the more renter-friendly periods we've seen in a decade. So the message here is pretty clear. Things are shifting in a big way, making it a better market for renters than it has been for a long time.
Okay, so this whole theme of lowering costs doesn't stop with housing. It moves right into healthcare. This week, we saw the launch of TrumpRx.gov, and the whole idea behind this site is to give people in the U.S. access to cheaper prescription drugs. It works using these most favored nation agreements, basically trying to get Americans the best prices available.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at these examples. They're showing huge price drops for some really common and expensive medications. Take Wegovy, the weight loss drug. It goes from, over $1,300 a month down to as low as $149. That's a massive difference. And it's not just that. They're also highlighting big savings on things like fertility treatments, which, a lot of people have to pay for completely out of pocket.
The effort to tackle high prices even hit the grocery store this week. The White House basically laid out their reasoning for why beef is so expensive right now. They're pointing to things like droughts, which have made the U.S. cattle herd super small. So what's their solution? Well, they issued a proclamation to temporarily let in more beef from other countries, specifically 80,000 metric tons from Argentina, to try and get more supply in and hopefully bring those prices down.
And one last thing on the economic front. This one's a bit more targeted. A new proclamation basically reopens a huge area off the New England coast, a marine national monument, to commercial fishing. The idea here, they say, is to lift the old restrictions to help out the local fishing industry.
Okay, so we've talked about what's happening at home. Now let's zoom out and look at the global stage. The second big theme that really stood out this week was all about an America First strategy for trade and foreign policy. So they kicked this off with a new executive order creating an America First arms transfer strategy. And the core idea, it's right there in the text, is to use the money from selling arms to other countries to actually build up America's own manufacturing and production capabilities here at home.
Another big move on the foreign policy front was this new tariff system aimed squarely at Iran. Basically, what it does is it gives the U.S. the power to slap extra tariffs on imports from any country that's buying goods or services from Iran. It's a tool designed to put economic pressure on Iran by isolating it.
And we actually saw how this kind of tariff strategy can work in practice, but with India. There was this extra 25% tariff on Indian goods because they were importing Russian oil. Well, this week, that tariff was removed. And the reason they gave for the change was that India has now promised to stop buying Russian oil and to work more closely with the U.S. on defense.
This wasn't just a one-off thing either. It's all part of a bigger trade deal with India. So what's in it? Well, India is going to lower its tariffs on a bunch of U.S. stuff. The U.S. will do the same for some Indian goods but keep tariffs on others. And here's the kicker. India is planning to buy a whopping $500 billion worth of American energy, planes, and tech over the next 5 years. It's a pretty huge deal.
All right, let's pivot to the third major theme of the week. And this one is impossible to ignore. A really strong focus on border security and, frankly, a major ramp-up of immigration enforcement.
The White House put out a big number this week. They announced that their Operation Metro surge in Minnesota has led to the arrest of over 4,000 people, who they describe as criminal illegal aliens. So that's a key metric they're highlighting from this ongoing operation.
And, they're not being subtle about their ultimate goal here. This quote from the border czar, Tom Homan, is about as direct as it gets. He says, "Let me be clear. President Trump fully intends to achieve mass deportations during this administration." So the policy goal is stated very, very clearly.
And to put more muscle behind that goal, there's a new executive order.
This one is all about information. It gives Homeland Security more access to federal criminal records, and, this is the key part, it lets them share that criminal history with other trusted countries. The whole point is to make the screening process for immigration much tougher.
This focus on security also included cooperation with our neighbors. The US, Canada, and Mexico got together for the North American Drug Dialogue. They came away with 3 big priorities: cracking down on drug trafficking in the supply chain, beefing up law enforcement, and, on the public health side, trying to reduce overdose deaths.
Okay, so for our final theme, we're moving from policy to something a little more ideological. We saw a whole string of proclamations and messages this week that really laid out a specific vision for American culture, history, and what it means to be an American.
For example, there was a message about the 178th anniversary of the Mexican-American War, and the language used was really specific. It called the war a legendary victory and framed it as a key moment that secured the American Southwest and expanded the country.
The proclamation for National Black History Month was also really interesting in how it was structured. On one hand, it celebrated the contributions of Black Americans, calling it an indispensable chapter in our grand American story. But at the same time, it very explicitly rejected what it described as a toxic and distorted view of history, specifically calling out what it sees as progressive attempts to divide people by race.
Then, for National Women and Girls in Sports Day, a message came out that was also a very clear policy statement. It said, and I'm quoting, that any program that rejects biological reality and deprives women of fair and safe athletic opportunities will not receive federal funds. So, a very firm line in the sand there.
So let's pull it all together. When you look at the whole week, you can really see 4 main themes taking shape. 1, tackling consumer costs like rent, drugs, and food. 2, a very clear America First approach to foreign policy and trade. 3, a major intensification of border security and immigration enforcement. And 4, pushing a very specific vision of American history and culture.
And that brings us right back to where we started. When you step back and look at everything together, from the price of beef to arms deals to border enforcement, it all begs one big question, right? Taken as a whole, what kind of future is this administration trying to build? What vision for the country are all these actions pointing towards?